definition of homelessness in Canada is defined as an individual or a group of individuals in a community without access to permanent, safe, immediate housing.
Since the early 90s, subsidized housing has been built in an attempt to offset the rapidly increasing rates of homelessness. That being said, these houses were built for the lower income families. The increase in homelessness rates started around the 1980s and had doubled by 1990. In 1998, the post-tax LICO line in larger urban centers was $14,510 for a single bedroom, $27,890 for a four-person family. Overall, lower income rates were about 12.2% or 1 in 8 Canadians.
The growth in homelessness across Canada in the 2000s escalated tremendously. It entered the decade with an already high poverty rate of 16.2%. Research showed that there was an estimate over 200,000 homeless people as early as 2005, roughly 1% of the population. Those who advocated said that there was possibly 20,000 to 30,000 more in hidden homeless categories. Canada had spent around $5.1 to $7 billion in emergency services, organizations, and nonprofits in 2008 due to high demand of these necessities for homeless people. Single adult men, people dealing with mental health issues and addictions, women with children fleeing violence, and Indigenous people are at higher risk of falling into homelessness.
Diving into the more recent decade, homelessness rates have continued to climb drastically. In order to understand why that is, you should first know about the different forms of homelessness. There are four main types of homelessness, those types being absolute homelessness, emergency shelter homelessness, provisionally/hidden homelessness, and relative homelessness. The first type of homelessness I'd like to introduce is absolute homelessness. Absolute homelessness is the most common form of homelessness that comes to a person's mind when speaking about the subject. This type of homelessness is a narrow concept, which includes those living in private or public places without consent, also sometimes referred to as squatters. This category includes those not living in places fit for habitation, such as tents or self-made huts. Emergency shelter is the second type of homelessness I'd like to introduce. It includes homeless shelters, housing from fleeing from domestics, emergency shelter relief for victims of natural disasters, as well as open shelters. Provisionally homelessness is the third type of homelessness we're going to introduce. This includes individuals that are currently living in transitional housing, individuals living in temporarily with friends or family, those in motels or hotels, those in institutional or correctional facilities, or those new to the country in what's known as a transitional housing unit. The last category that I want to make everyone aware of is relative or at-risk homelessness. This category is a bit different. This category does not involve being actively without a place to reside, but the individual is experiencing a serious risk of homelessness due to domestic, unemployment, specific housing situations, or other unforeseen circumstances. Now that we've gone over the different types of homelessness, let's dive into the more recent decade. In 2016, something known as a point-in-time count took place in many communities across Canada. A point-in-time count provides a snapshot of a simple day for those of a specific demographic in a certain area. This count relates to the growing rates of homelessness in Canada. The PIC count may also include those in correctional or health facilities, as well as those staying with others due to no fixed address. The first PIC count took place in 2016 across a total of 32 participating communities. A total of 5,954 people were identified to be experiencing homelessness in core populations. Counts varied from 12 to 1,201 people, based on community. A total of 1,417 people, equaling 24%, were in unsheltered locations. 2,832 people, equaling 47%, were in shelters, and a total of 1,705 people, equaling 29%, were in transitional facilities. Of the 4,579 people interviewed, 1,543 people were in the core population, while 1,306 of these people didn't know where they were going to stay, were in a health or correctional facility, or were experiencing hidden homelessness. In 2018, the PIP count was performed yet again, this time in 61 communities across Canada. On a single day in 2018, more than 25,000 individuals over 61 communities were all in a state of homelessness. It is estimated that over 235,000 people in Canada experience homelessness each year. These people surveyed include the unsheltered, those in a shelter, those in transitional housing, staying with others in correctional or health facilities, as well as those in unknown locations. The results show that people experiencing chronic homelessness account for 60% of all people responding, whereas episodic homelessness only accounted for 8%. Chronic homelessness was typically identified in the north and west, as well as in the lower east. Looking at these rates, we can see the increase in homelessness over the years. 2021 is the most recent PIT count we're going to be comparing. The permanent emergency shelter capacity dropped dramatically in 2020 and during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic to adhere to public health measures and policies. In 2021, there was partial recovery in capacity, although the individuals still struggled. This substantial decrease of shelter capacity likely contributed to a reduction in number of people accessing shelter system in 2020 and 2019 compared to previous years. Between 2019 and 2020, shelter capacity, defined as the number of beds available on a given night, decreased by over 20% overall, with larger decreases among youth and adult shelters. The overall system capacity had largely recovered by 2021, a 1.5% increase compared to 2019. In 2020, there were fewer beds, but the beds were still full. In 2021, the number of beds had mostly recovered, but the shelter use did not increase at the same rate. This may be due to a combination of factors, including ongoing shelter avoidance due to the pandemic or safety concern, continued use of temporary shelters, which are not included in this point of time analysis, and the presence of policies like the CERB benefit. The average occupancy rate among all shelters in 2021 was 85.7%, compared to the 93.7% in 2020. The occupancy rate for youth shelter was 69.7%, while general shelters had an occupancy rate of 83%. Family shelters had occupancy rates of 106%. This high occupancy rate in family shelters was notable given the large increases of capacity during 2021.